TikTok, it's time to rock. It's the Sunday show, and we have a guest. We have a guest with us on the Sunday show. We have Hos from the 5150 show sticking his nose in. In fact, he is the main reason why we are actually doing this show. We normally rank tracks on albums, but he's given us something a little bit different to think about. We're talking about albums, all-time favorite albums, and my gosh, there are some surprises there, Hos. I can't wait.
I'm sorry, guys, to put this on you. Yeah, I just thought it would be a really fun way to start the year. And also because as much as the four of us have talked about music in the last 6 months, I'd be curious as much as anyone as to what your favorite albums each would be. Like if you kind of had to try and whittle it down to 5. Obviously, really, truly saying these are my 5 top albums exactly is a bit ridiculous for a passionate music lover, you know. So really the way I like to think of it is these are 5 of our top favorite albums that we love. And look, obviously I don't know about you guys, but I had some real trouble trying to work out which ones had to go into the honorable mentions category, you know.
Well, I know Brad was running around the backyard like a headless chicken trying to work out his list, and I know that Simon's worn out carpet in that little room that he's got trying to work out his list. So, yeah.
It's been a very interesting task, and of course, for anyone joining us live in the chat, it'll be really interesting to see whether you are disgusted with some of our choices or you agree or indeed actually, like, if you know, please feel free to write what your own choices would be, because I'd be fascinated to know that about all our friends in the chat just the same, you know.
Awesome. Brad, I'm sorry to tell everybody your secret that you were running around like a headless chicken. I'm sorry, bro.
Look, there's not much left to share anymore, Andrew. You keep giving away all my secrets. You might as well just go for it, mate. To get them all out there, keep everyone happy. You know, I'm happy to be a laugh for everyone.
Yeah.
And actually, I guys, I'll tell you the true story with the Rock Professor. It wasn't difficult for him. It was because we've been doing a lot of shows with the Rock Professor, so we've got a bit of an idea. So the Rock Professor's list, I'm not going to say it was predictable. But exactly what you would expect. My list, unfortunately, is boringly predictable. But we'll get there, Hos. We'll get there.
No. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I mean, you guys got to know. See, for anyone watching this, the 3 gentlemen in the chat we all sort of know what the 5 that we've chosen. And I think a couple of eyebrows were raised at mine. But you see, you got to remember that for me, mine are predictable. You know what I mean? So, but that's why this is interesting, because now I get to learn a little bit more about Andrew and Brad and Simon, and because, you know, we all love the blues, we all love rock and roll, we all love guitar music, we all love classic albums from the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, especially those decades, but of course even some from the 80s and to more modern ones. But what's fascinating to me is if you 3 had to pick 5 records that you would say, okay, that's one of my 5 favorite records I've ever heard. That's what fascinates me like no end. And yeah, I'm really curious. This is an indulgent episode for me, boys, because I'm really doing this just so I can find out about your favorite 5 albums and learn a bit more about you, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I'm looking forward to it as well. I think I know everyone's top 5, and my top 5. My top 5 I could have changed like this morning, and I've thought about it. There's a massive honourable list I've got going, which might, you know, when we do this show again in 3 months' time, obviously those honourable lists might become
Yeah.
top 5. But I have to be honest with you guys.
Yes.
Very hard to pick a top 5. The majority of my top 5 will the staples that are always going to be there for particular reasons. But definitely on my next top 5 list will be a little bit tweaked. But these that I've picked for today are massive influences for me as a musician, as a not just a guitar player, but as a musician. So and a fan, a listener. So delving into music and production and things like that. So, but I'm looking forward to it, guys. Let's get into it, I reckon.
Yeah, I agree. Before we do, I'm going to do some shout outs to the lovely people already here joining us live in the chat. So I'd like to say, well, we all would. I'll do the honors, but of course, this comes from all 4 of us. An amazing Happy New Year to everyone watching.
Yeah.
Layla, you've already been busy in the chat, which is wonderful as always. Ellen, of course, Happy New Year, Ellen. Hugh Caldwell, Happy New Year. John ZD351, the illustrious, Happy New Year, sir. Mark Tanner, Happy New Year. Charmaine Taylor, Happy New Year. Derek Clapton, Happy New Year.
Derek, good morning.
And that's our live chat as of 10 minutes into the show. Happy New Year, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Happy New Year, guys.
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
An amazing 2022 to everyone.
Yeah, I think we can all feel that there's a better year coming ahead for us than the one just passed, and it's exciting. It's a good feeling. Nelson Rodriguez has just snuck into the chat. Nelson, happy New Year, brother. Yeah. Nelson Rodriguez. So yeah. 2022 is going to be good. And for all the people that are into numerology, which I'm not really, but I know some people that are, apparently the 2022 is a very auspicious year. And it's going to be a good one for all of us, for the world and musically. And there's a lot of fun to be had around the corner.
Yeah, awesome. Well said.
I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear that, because if indications and signposts point to it better down, the yellow brick road, I'm on there. I'm on there, Hos. Brad, I'm there, bro. I'm on that yellow brick road, brother.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
John ZT351 says, I'm into old, what is it? Old morology, not numerology, old morology.
Old morology.
Okay.
Old morology.
Nice one.
Lord.
Well, sorry, go on.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, while we're doing shout outs, probably a really appropriate time to send our best wishes to our good friend Warren. All the best, buddy. It's been great to see you chatting in the comments of the online YouTube that we've got, mate. So thank you so much. We can't wait to see you back in the chat, buddy.
Absolutely,
Warren. 2022.
Yeah, 100%. Totally. Not support, but just sending warmest wishes, Warren, from everyone here. Yeah. And we've got Arvin just joining us in the chat as well. Happy New Year, Arvin.
Hey, brother.
Yeah. I'd like to, just before we get into the actual records, I'd be curious as to what everyone's metrics were, what the criteria was for trying to whittle down for passionate music people like us. Like, how the hell do you get it down to even 5 possibilities, really? So Brad, let me ask you first: did you have any specific criteria in mind to whittle it down, or were you just going on gut instinct?
More how it resonated with me. That the records that have always been staples in the top part of my collection of whatever mood I'm in, I can put one of those albums on and it pulls me back to that same place and time when I first listened to it and blew my hair back. Right? There's particular albums that do that, and there's a handful that aren't in this top 5 list, because I can't fit 15 albums into a top 5 list.
I know.
But, but they're staples in my collection. Almost have influenced the musician I am today. That's how I picked them. Yeah, it's just they very heavily influence who I am as a musician. So.
Does that mean that you think that most of yours, that you culled down from, would come from a period when you were younger and really more of a sponge with music and very influential, if that makes sense?
100%. Great question. And yes, they're all from my, when I first started really taking notice of music more so than just hearing it on the radio. When I first started listening to songs and listening and I mean, back then deep diving into them myself without having the show, like really analyzing what was going on in the songs, but more to the point when you put a particular record on and there's just so much in that record that just makes you want to become it's like you resonate with it, the frequency properly. Like there's themes of albums, sure, but it's not necessarily about the theme. It's like you can put the album on from start to finish and appreciate the whole thing without having to sort of skip a track, never a skip.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, I'm really glad you said that, because it's easy to pick an album that just broadly, like you like most of the tracks from it. But I think for me, and I didn't even realize this until I heard you say it just now, that subconsciously I've listened to these records from start to finish hundreds of times.
Yeah.
And so I think that every track has its own place in it is a massive part of whittling it down.
Yeah. And like, say, for example, the 5 albums I've picked, they might not even have necessarily my favorite song from that artist on that album, but it's the entire album as a piece. That's for me why I picked the albums I've picked. But definitely, I reckon this top 5 would be my normal call-to list in my record collection to go to when I don't know what to listen to. I'll just chuck one of them on because they take me back to that moment. And that's the music. The beautiful thing about music is it does take us back to that moment we first heard it. It's like hearing it fresh again. I'll be honest, there's been times when I've pulled myself away from these records for a while because I've overheard them, but you always get back to them with fresh ears.
Yeah.
As we get into the albums in particular, I will be telling you that like every time I listen to particular songs, I'm hearing little nuances that I've never heard before, little differences. I'm like, wow. So when the record can give you like goosebumps and it sort of resonates with you, on all levels musically, like a harmonious connection to it, that's why I picked it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. What about you, Simon? Did you have any sort of? Yeah, go on.
I didn't have too much difficulty. The way I did it was I kind of picked my top 5 favorite artists. So I went down the artist route. So I thought, right, okay, who have I listened to? A bit like Brad, who have I listened to consistently over the last 50 years?
Yep.
Who have I bought records by? Who do I have? What's my, majority of things in my collection? And it was quite easy to pick out 5 artists. I could have picked out more than 5 artists, but it's quite easy to pick out top 5 artists and then pick out my favorite album from those top 5 artists, either because they have some historical significance to me. Yeah. In the main, probably that, or, I just think they're great records. But that's how I did it. So I kind of, but as Brad says, next week it could be completely different.
Well, of course. And, and there's no wrong way. Like to that, I actually did it the opposite way. I decided to not make it artist-based and really go, okay, so even if it's an artist that is not one of my favorite artists of all time, but that album I've listened to so many times because there's something that gets under your skin, and whether it's the way it sounds in your ears or whether it's the way it feels in your heart or whether it's you're cranking it up in your headphones and you're doing the dishes and it makes you want to dance because there's no one else in the house. There's like something about that one record that's just desert island kind of thing, like which.
Ooh, has it gone off quiet for everyone or just for him?
Hos, can't hear you.
You've gone silent. We've lost your sound.
How's that? Is that better?
That's better.
Yeah, we can hear you, brother.
What'd you do?
Sorry. Obviously, the adjudicator who's not on screen is decided that's enough. That's enough of you crapping on the microphone. Anyway, I don't know how much you missed, but I think you get the idea. Is that for me, and that's why I'm fascinated because I think we've all there will be some commonality in how the four of us have picked these records, but there will be some subtle differences too. And I think that's really fascinating. So what about you, Andrew? Did you have any sort of like how did you attempt to do it?
With no science at all, and certainly not picked by the artist. I'm reflecting on it now. My album choices are solely because of the album, and what it resonates in me. I have an emotional attachment, obviously, to a lot of the albums that we talk about, as we all do, and. You know, that's the perspective that I've come from, and it's not my. I've got a safety valve though, guys. This is my top or favorite 5. It's not my Desert Island 5, because the Desert Island 5 is probably a show that we have to do probably end of the year, because that's the list that you gotta take with you. But I'm certainly looking forward to hearing especially what you guys have to say about your albums. But look, it's just the albums, bro, that I love. That's right. What I picked.
Yeah, the same for me. One of the criteria for me was definitely that I had to love them in a way that it was almost like a relationship with that album. You know, when you listen to it, you get a feeling in your heart. Like, so it's more than just an intellectual decision, you know, because, and some of mine, I realized, I was almost surprised to whittle it down and go, I've got to put that in my top 5, because intellectually it almost makes no sense for me for what I do in my career. But I realized that if I was going away to the moon and I could only take 5 records, that'd be one I'd want to take, you know? So, and welcome to Adam Roach, who's just joined us live in the chat. Adam, how you doing? Happy New Year, brother.
Yeah. Morning,
Adam. I love it, fellas. Let's get into it. Andrew, I believe you're on the starting block.
Awesome. Thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to go first. So the first album I picked, gentlemen, is the Beano album. And we've done a lot of shows on the Beano album, and I'm going to keep saying it. We'll probably do a lot more shows on the Beano album. Now, my couple of minutes that you guys have given me to talk about this album, I'm going to talk back and reflect on when I first heard this album. I didn't know anything about this album when I heard it when I was a young guy, that it was this classic great album that has gained momentum, certainly with social media, over the last 20 years. Back when I first heard this album, this was a deep dive album that no one was listening to. You know, the Beano album. It was just a rare album, a fans album. So a lot of people who just have a brief fling with Eric Clapton might have heard the album, might have heard it. So. But back in the day, it was certainly something. It was a deep dive, and I felt like when I was listening to it, when I first heard "Stepping Out" on this album, Hos, Brad, and Simon, it blew me away. That tone that I heard when I was 14 years old just blew me away. And obviously, over time, we realise, read, and you hear other artists like Jimmy Page and everybody else talking how influential this album was for the players that Brad mentioned when he talked about his album. So, but I'm just talking about me, a 14-year-old boy listening to this album, being blown away, and I still get that feeling today when I listen to this album, Hos.
Wow, that's awesome. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's an album that you're blown away when you first heard it. You're blown away still 3 years in, and you're blown away now all these years later. Like that is that's awesome. Wonderful.
Yeah. Well done.
Well, what's yours, okay. Hos?
Mine is I'm going to start with an album that I would say probably out of all the 20 albums we're going to talk about right now, this might have sold the least amount of copies, but not because it isn't awesome. It's because it comes from the jazz world more than the pop or the rock, world. And in 1993, when I was studying jazz at the College of the Arts, obviously we're all furiously trying to figure out like what's the best thing to learn and listen from. And a good mate of mine was like, "Hey, have you heard this?" And he showed me a record that was Chick Corea. And for anyone that doesn't know Chick Corea, arguably one of the most incredible jazz pianists of probably all time. He'd be up there in the top 10, I would say. Whether you love Oscar Peterson or whoever else, it doesn't matter. Keith Jarrett, Chick Corea's in there, and he did a series of shows at Carnegie Theater in New York with Bobby McFerrin, and it was just the two of them, so just piano and vocal, and they did a bunch of shows back to back in 1992, and it was completely unrehearsed, deliberately unrehearsed. So the idea was they would pick 5 or 6 jazz standards and get up on stage at a concert hall in front of everyone, and then just basically look at each other and go. And I can tell you, for anyone that doesn't listen to much jazz, this would be the one album I would say, listen to this, and it will tell you all the most beautiful things about jazz, all in one record. And if you want to go online and listen to even one song off it to give you a taste of what I'm talking about, punch in Chick Corea, Bobby McFerrin Play, which is the name of the record, and Autumn Leaves, the song, which most people know as the jazz standard. It's a pretty run-of-the-mill jazz standard. But the way that they do Autumn Leaves for 10 minutes is like, I would have to say, I think it's one of the greatest pieces of music that I've ever heard. And so that album for me, when I just want something beautiful and quiet, but also intellectually mind-bending, like I wouldn't even know how to name some of the chords that Chick Corea is playing, but Bobby McFerrin doesn't miss a beat. Bobby McFerrin, for most people, would know him from Don't Worry, Be Happy. But I can promise you that that's his more than words. You know, that's his big pop song to generate a little bit of extra income probably. But Bobby McFerrin's one of the most gifted singers of all time. And when you hear him sing on this album, he's singing double bass lines, he's singing trumpet solos, and he's doing the drums while Chick Corea is singing. And the two of them just working off each other is just absolutely magical. And so that's an album and you can hear the audience fully. So there's jokes in it. It's really lighthearted, and they're sort of joking with each other musically. So one will do something, and then another one will play something else. And stick some headphones on and have a listen to Autumn Leaves, just even that one song, and you'll get a feeling for what I mean. But I'd have to say that's in my top 5.
Wow. That's awesome. I'm going to go have a listen to that now, Hos.
Okay, cool.
Definitely. I can't wait.
I'm familiar with Autumn Leaves. A few artists have covered that. I think even Clapton did a version of it. But I'm certainly looking forward to checking that out. I didn't want to cheat. And go and listen to some of these albums, because if you guys in the chat didn't know this, we kind of know what our co-hosts are going to be talking about. But I purposely didn't want to cheat, because I wanted to hear what each co-host had to say and then go and listen to these albums that I weren't aware of. So, yeah, thank you.
Actually, Andrew, I feel exactly the same. I was going to go through and really deep dive on all the songs you guys had picked, but then I thought, you know what? I'm going to listen to them with different ears after hearing why you love them so much. So, yeah. Brad?
No, it's Simon. Simon next.
Oh, Simon's then. Sorry.
Yeah, Rock Professor.
Rock Professor.
Right, pay attention. This will surprise you not at all. The first album I've chosen is Dancing in the Town by Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, nice.
I first heard it. This was the first record I bought of his, 1978, when it came out. I've read a review of it in the NME, and I was sort of intrigued by it as a thing. Clearly, you can't go and listen to it online in 1978 or anything like that. You have to go out and buy the real thing. But I went out and bought it, and I think even then it was unlike anything I'd heard before. Now that sounds a bit weird thing to say in terms of Bruce Springsteen, who you would put in the classic rock. You know, you can see a line from his rock and roll, 60s soul roots through into this. But it struck me that the songs and the presentation of them was something that I'd not heard before. Yeah,
Yep.
I didn't have particularly a lineage. It wasn't like Led Zeppelin. It wasn't like the things I listened to before. It was a new thing. I think it was like, it has 10 tightly visioned stark sounding records in keeping with the punk ethos, the new wave punk thing that was going on at that time, and not in keeping with the sort of more expansive rock stuff that was going on in the late 70s in America. Much more. And I'm 20 years old in 1970, 20, and the sort of darkness of the vision. It's about people's growing up. It's about their loss of innocence. It's about realizing the world is not their oyster, and life is crushing their dreams, and trying to find a way into that and stuff. And clearly that resonates with somebody who's 20 years old. You'll see in my records there's a theme on these records and I love it still. I mean, it is my favorite Bruce Springsteen record as an example. Others, I'm Born to Run, probably Thunder Road is one of my favorite tracks. This is a town full of losers and I'm pulling out of here to win. It's one of the great couplets ever in kind of teenage, I'll show them kind of things. But there's lots of things. But so for me, it's the album cover says it all. It's a kind of stark vision, serious.
Love it.
And I think this is one of the first times that I sort of realised the depth at which rock could take you. The things that it could talk about. They were, realistic things. Songs about, people's working lives and stuff, and people, your relationship with your parents. Adam Raised a Cane is about that, and all these things. And the words, and they resonated with me in a way that I still don't understand, but the resonation was and is still there. And and when he sings certain lines in it and stuff like that, I'm lost really. And I feel he has, he's not the world's greatest anything, Bruce Springsteen, but he has, his brilliance, I think, is in the way that he's in his, and I put this in inverted commas, in his honesty. What he sings about, the way he sings about it, is an honest thing. Now, if you've ever seen his live on Broadway show, the first thing he comes on, he says, "I'm a charlatan. I have never been a working man in my life." Right. Which is a fantastic. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's a fantastic show. But that first thing, but clearly, his father was a working class guy, works in the factories and all sorts of things. He comes from that background. Therefore, he may not have done it himself, but he's seen it. And and that honesty and that kind of, the emotion that comes through for me, I'll be on that hill because I can't stop. I'll be on that hill with everything that I got. It's kind of bang. It really strikes an emotion to the emotional heart of me as a person and as a thing. Yeah. So that's my first choice. I've listened to it for 43 years, and I will carry on listening to it. For me, it's one of the great records. Fantastic.
That's beautiful. And
I'm sure everyone's heard it.
Of course, and a great choice. And I understand everything you're saying. Can I just quickly say, I think a great artist doesn't necessarily have to have lived what they're making the art about, but they have to be a conduit to being able to absorb emotions from other human beings and be almost able to write somebody else's story. I think that's what makes a great artist. So, and Bruce is obviously one of them.
For me, he is anyway. So.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, is it me? I'm up to
it's
me.
You. You're up.
Yeah.
Well, there's not much of a surprise in my list, guys. My first one is Jimi Hendrix, Axis Boulder's Love. It's a beautiful album. It's just got, I came into this album after listening to like a greatest hits of Jimi Hendrix, and then I bought Are You Experienced? And obviously the next progression was Electric Ladyland and Axis Boulder's Love. Axis Boulder's Love, interestingly, doesn't have my favorite Jimi Hendrix song on it, but as an album, it just explores a lot of his roots in all different styles of music. As a songwriter, he's expanded a little bit away from just playing Purple Haze and Foxy Lady. He's showing a little bit more of a delicate side, which is something I absolutely adore in guitar players that can play great over the top, Hendrix used to be a fuzz man, wow, this and that, but hearing some of those cleaner tones and lush things with some Leslie speakers and all sorts of things, it just, the tones, the melodies of the songs, even the album cover. I mean, come on, guys, that's a cool,
awesome.
Yeah. It's like one of the coolest album covers ever. So for me, it's that's my top one, probably of all time. Just I go away from it. Sometimes I stop listening to it because I've heard it that many times. But whenever I put it on, when you listen to songs like Spanish Castle Magic, Wait Until Tomorrow, Little Wing, 6'9", Castles Made of Sand, Bold as Love. I mean, Bold as Love, that has to be one of the most beautiful songs ever written. It gives me goosebumps talking about it. I mean, you go to listen to the rhythm guitar playing in that song, and everyone goes on about lead guitar players and Jimi Hendrix was the greatest, but I actually believe Hendrix was one of the best rhythm guitar players that I've ever heard, because he played so uniquely, not necessarily on the 1 and the 2 and the 3 and the 4. He's like on the 1, then he sort of slipped the 2 and come in on a bit off the 2, or in between the 2 and the 3, and then end up in time by the end of the bar. So he's just one of those guys that I don't know. You listen to Band of Gypsies, you listen to him playing straight out soul funk type things, and then this was just a really important album for Hendrix, and I could listen to it all day. So there's a quirky start to it, like it's got a little intro there. But overall, as soon as Spanish Castle Magic comes in, one of the first songs I ever learned on guitar with my guitar teacher, Dave Leslie, was Castles Made of Sand. And there was a reason.
Wow.
Yeah, because I wanted to explore that style of playing. I'd explored rock already. I wanted to play more delicate things, and so there you go, guys. That's my first one.
Wasn't the first song you were doing as a beginner, Brad? First time
my first song I ever learned on guitar was "Smells Like Teen Spirit" by Nirvana.
That's great. That's great. Awesome, Brad. Hey, can I just quickly say, talking about Hendrix's rhythm playing, and of course also his songwriting, I think the real greats are also incredible songwriters. It's never just about guitar solos with the real greats. The ones that we can. The top 10 or top 20 of all time. And any of my guitar students that can even play great, they can play Eddie licks, Yngwie Malmsteen licks, they can play, but everybody struggles with Hendrix rhythm. Everybody. It's deceptively tricky, and that's the genius of it. So yeah, right on.
Thanks, Hos. Yeah.
Awesome.
Andrew.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Simon and Hos and Brad, for the first round picks. Fantastic, guys. Brilliant. I'm the show card boy. Round two. Okay.
Oh, we should have done that.
Yeah. Look, if Beano wasn't an instant classic for fans when it first came out, the second album I've picked became an instant classic with fans and indeed with rock writers at the time. Lester Bangs is on record calling it the greatest live album ever. What I love about this album is, it's not just the music, but it's what's enmeshed in this album. It's the 69 tour for the Rolling Stones, the Give Me Shelter film, the images, how Keith oozes this coolness on stage. You've got Mick Taylor just being absolutely cool, standing there, just everything. When I was a young guy, and even now, and in my young age now, I still look at this album, I look at this period in the Rolling Stones, and I just see coolness. And it was just the beginning of this run that they were going to have that was untouched. So the album that I've picked, guys, is Get Yer Ya-Ya's out. From the awesome opening with the manager, is everybody ready? Just that in itself is just getting you prepared for what the heck is going on, and then it just breaks into solid rock and roll. I know the rock professor likes talking about this, but what's really, really interesting is that they play a couple of golden oldies, a couple of Chuck Berry songs, Carol, for example, which was considered an old song in 1969, 1970. But it was only, the song would have only been 10 years old, probably 11 years old.
Yeah.
And back then it was considered an oldie. But again, what the Rolling Stones managed to do with a song and transform it and make it into their own, and the interplay on the tracks between the band and the audience, you know, Mick Jagger saying, you know, does any, you know, you don't want to see my pants fall down, you know, he's popped the button in his trousers. And it's just like, guys, back in the olden days, you're listening to this, you're looking at the record and you're hearing this, you know, and it's just putting you in this position, Hos, that you didn't have, because I hadn't seen Give Me Shelter at that time. So
Right.
it's a classic album. I love the album to bits, and it's one of the best live albums ever.
And it's actually, Andrew, not a live album that I'm particularly familiar with. So I'm going to enjoy going and listening to that whole thing. Now, keeping in mind all the things that you just said, it's going to be awesome.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do, brother.
Well, my next one is going to be it's from a solo female artist. And this particular album is from 1996. But let me just sneak in a bit of info, and we'll see if anyone knows who I'm going to talk about, and then I'll drop it. But in 1992, she was actually almost going to be the replacement bass player of Living Colour. So you can imagine that. I actually think that would have been super cool, but in a way, I'm glad it didn't happen, because then she would have never made this record. She is credited as being the queen of neo soul. She has recorded with Tupac Shakur, Madonna, Herbie Hancock, and John Mellencamp, just to name a bunch. And that is a pretty eclectic group of people. Sting loves her so much that he books her as his opening act when he goes on tour. And I would say that her bass playing is people seem to somehow, especially with female bass players, they compare them to other female bass players. I would just go to say that her bass playing is the deepest pocket and the funkiest groove of any bass player that I've ever heard ever, or certainly equal with. So her vocals are silky and sultry and sexy, and I would say she's probably my favorite female vocalist. And her name is Meshell Ndegeocello, and the album is Peace Beyond Passion from 1996. It was, I'd have to say,
how do you spell it, Simon? How do you spell her surname?
It's Swahili. It means bird that plays cello. It's NDG. Hang on, I can't even think. I'm just going to pull it up on my sheet. Here we go.
For 10.
Ndegeocello. So like Ndegeocello.
Yeah. What's it called?
And the album is called Peace Beyond Passion. And it's basically, like, if I was to sum it up in a style, I would say it's soul, R&B, funk, but it is one of the coolest sounding things that I've ever heard. And I discovered it because I walked into a record store, which was JB Hi-Fi just when it came out in 96. And you know how the record stores they don't exist anymore, of course, as everyone knows, but you could walk in and they'd always have whatever the latest release cool thing was playing in the background. And I was in there to go and buy a new Van Halen record or something, no doubt. And I heard this in the background. I walked straight up to the counter and I said, "What's this?" And they showed me, and I just bought it and went home without buying my Van Halen record, which was probably FUCK in, I think, 96 or something around that. And I took it home, and I think since then I would have listened to this record about 1,200 times. Wow. Like, it is one of my most listened to records ever. And if someone wanted an introduction to like cool, sexy female R&B funk soul, this is absolutely, I think, the greatest album you could ever listen to.
Fantastic.
Wow, I've got to go listen to it with fresh ears now.
Remind me in the green room, so I've got a funny story about that sort of thing.
Oh, good.
When I worked in a record shop, but I'll tell it
Fantastic.
afterwards.
Fantastic. Simon, what's your next one?
Okay, my next album, going to surprise you. I don't know actually. But as you can see, I've been rootling in my cupboard for things. My next album is this one. See, as Andrew's not doing putting the sleeves together, I'm doing it myself. So this is Blood on the Track by Bob Dylan. I think this is the album that got me into Bob Dylan, really. I mean, I knew Blowing in the Wind and I'd learned how to play the kind of the early folk stuff, but I'd not really investigated beyond that, really, and until this album when it came out. And for me, this is my favourite album of his, I think, by a smidge, but it's up there. It's the first one that really got me into him. It's an extraordinary record of, I mean, it's too glib a statement to say that it's his divorce record. I mean, I think that, that he was splitting up from his wife, Sarah, at the time that he wrote it and recorded it. But it channels that experience, I think, to a much more universal thing. I think it's always dangerous with things. Artists take experiences, but making them universal rather than making them point. So a song like "Idiot Wind" is not is a furious song of an explosive, angry song with extraordinary lyrics. But I mean, there's some that he can always just twist it at the end. And it just, if I just read these lines out, you'll get the idea. I've been double-crossed now for the very last time. Now I'm finally free. I kiss goodbye to the howling beast on the borderline which separated you from me. You'll never know the hurt I suffered nor the pain I rise above. And that's all about him, yeah? Then the last two lines are, and I'll never know the same about you, your holiness or your kind of love, and it makes me feel so sorry. I'm going to swear. When I hear that, I just know that I'm in the presence of something so special. Somebody who can write that in that way, and that thing at the end that is not just a one-sided, pointy finger thing. It's just extraordinary. And for me, this album has many moments like that. It has an extraordinary way that he plays with time. He went on a painting course. Everybody knows this, but he went on a painting course, and it was a very kind of, and he wanted to write albums that were a bit like Cubist, like Picasso, where you see all the facets of it in one painting. So you can see both. Picasso will paint a side view of the face, but you put both eyes in and stuff like that. So he will go from me to they to she to them to you to, within one song. Tangled Up in Blues is a very good example of that. But so for me. Again, a record that can, conjure up that sort of words and those sorts of things is for me, as I say, strikes to the very core of me as ever. Who knows? I'm choosing really cheerful, upbeat records. It's not, but yeah, again, what my favorite, and Dylan's done so much that is just fantastic. But for me, my own personal one, this is my personal favorite. The one.
Awesome.
The one.
Or the one. Wow. Okay. Wow. Wow. Dylan is worthy of the one. That's for sure. Yeah.
Not everyone is and I accept that not everyone is, likes it in the same way that I do. But that's fine. It's all good.
It doesn't matter because it's in your top 5.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why I love that album too, guys, it's got this tone behind the production that I don't think a lot of Bob Dylan albums have, and it wasn't until later on when I started reading it a little bit. A lot of the songs were what's happened to Hos?
He just turned his camera off.
Oh, okay, that's okay. I sorry, guys. I thought I may have done something here. Back screen. It wasn't until later on when I actually found out that a lot of the songs were recorded in open tunings, and then the switch went off because that's why open tunings give you a different tonal response to standard concert tuning or standard tuning, whatever it's called for the guitar. So I like that. I like that, Simon. I think it's a great album too. Love it.
Oh, there's like, there's two versions that, he went and re-recorded half the songs, at the behest of his brother, who said, just did them in 2 days at the end of, in Minneapolis with a pickup band, whistle them out like that. Amazing.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've listened to that one, Simon, so I'm definitely going to go give that another listen. I'm going to be listening to all these ones, so that's great.
Brad?
Well, we've done a show on this particular album, a deep dive, so it's no secret to anyone that Abbey Road is probably one of my all-time favorite records anyway. And it's it's a big part of my life. It's there's something about the record that just spells brilliance for me on so many levels. Evokes emotion. There's some of the most beautifully written songs on it. It just highlights the Beatles' brilliance. They recorded like they went back and recorded like they used to, and I believe that this album's got some of the greatest Beatles songs on it ever. Just you have to listen to this album from start to finish. You can't just listen to one track and go, I like this album. You've got to listen to it like a journey, and that's why most of my albums I pick are because they are like journeys. But I still to this day, one of my favorite Beatles songs ever is Something by George Harrison, and I believe and my second favorite song is Here Comes the Sun, and it's on this record too. So kind of just you listen to those songs and they evoke emotion. If music can do that to you, in my opinion, it's next level. It's not just something you put on in the background to listen to. It's actually something that this album in particular, I stop what I'm doing to listen to it. I think it deserves that respect. So that's why I picked this album.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that choice. Yep.
I agree with you, brother. It's a masterpiece.
It is. It's a masterpiece.
Yeah. Guys, again, round three. Fantastic. Okay, my third album, guys, I've picked, and the reason why I've picked this album, that's the way, Hos. Get ready for round four. I picked this album because of what I've learnt about this album recently. One of the main band members on this album, contributors to the album, revealed to us on YouTube a lot of information that led up to the recording of this album, gave us a lot of information that happened behind the scenes that we didn't get, and dispelled a lot of rumors that we had over 20, 30, 40 years. Also, it's a benchmark for the channel because I think the 3 shows that we did in preparation for this album were fantastic, and I picked up a lot of information from my co-hosts. So the album, my third album, is Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs. I love that album. Again, I love the story behind it. How the band were recording one of Brad's favorite Beatles solo albums was the house band, and how they went on, and the story behind a lot of the songs. I just love it. Again, Hos, you asked us at the top of the show, what is it that gives you this this idea of why you love an album? It's the stories behind these albums, guys, that I love. Gosh, the music's brilliant. Don't get me wrong. Every track on that album is just fantastic. But I just love the back story and then what happened to Clapton after this album? Again, just you know, walked away from it. Loved the album.
Yeah, awesome,
Absolute cracking album. It's definitely one of my favorites as well, Andrew. And I loved doing those shows we did on that album. That was a real favorite for me.
Yeah, awesome. All right, my next one is going to be from an Australian band from 1982, and it's Midnight Oil's 10-9-8-7-6-5-4-3-2-1, or as most people just better know it as 10-1. I grew to love this album because my parents had it on vinyl, and so I used to just spend so much time going through my parents' record collection when I was young. And actually, I didn't like this album at first. When I first heard this album, I guess I would have only been, I don't know, I suppose I was maybe like 10 or 11 or 12. And I didn't like it because I really, even back then, I was a don't bore us, get to the chorus guy. I loved songs. And I just wanted, I liked 3-minute 30 punchy pop songs. Give me a hook, smack me over the head with the chorus. And make me want to get up and dance my little 10-year-old bum off, you know? And so that I used to love that. So my favorite vinyl records of even my parents back then were kind of from bands that it was definitely more radio, you know? I wasn't, and it's actually why it took me a very, very long time to get into Led Zeppelin, because as you would all know, the early records, there was a lot of sort of jammy odysseys, you know? And anything that was kind of jammy odysseys, all those prog bands from back then, the 60s and the 70s, I didn't like them when I was a kid. It was only later in life where I really appreciated what they had contributed to music, you know? And so this record, Midnight Oil's 10-1, I didn't really like, but because my parents didn't have hundreds and hundreds of records, I think they only had about maybe 30 or 40 different records that I liked that I used to play. I would just go in order of all the records, and when I got to the end, I would start again. And so I heard it over and over. And then I used to just listen with headphones, and something happened to me. And then as I got older as a musician and started being, you know, working and writing songs and doing work as a producer and a mix engineer and stuff, that was one day when I put my headphones on and I put this record on because something sort of called me to it. You know, I was like, oh, that record I used to listen to when I was a kid. Let's have another listen to that. And then it was like one of those epiphany moments, you know, where you just like bonked over the head, or like, you know, people talk about how it feels like honey's just falling all over you and you feel different. And I was listening to it with fresh ears as an adult and as a working musician. And I went, oh my God, this is one of the most incredible pieces of music that I've ever listened to. And I fully understood what they had done. And so they recorded this record in London, and they had brand new rookie 21-year-old producer, Nick Launay, who was a pretty kind of, you know, left of center style producer. So his favorite thing was to get razor blades out, and he would cut 2-inch tape in zigzags, not even straight across, so he could get out particular tracks, which I can't even imagine now, but that'd be like the equivalent of in Pro Tools just deleting one track. But he was doing it with razor blades, and they used to open up piano lids and play the strings with drumsticks. Those classic crashing sounds that everyone knows from the end of the drum solo at Power and the Passion is actually light bulbs in the studio that they were throwing down from a ladder and recording. And so now that I've read up on how they did all that stuff, I mean, they really, like, they were recording guitars by recording the guitar, then slowing the tape machines down and putting that output into another tape machine, and pitch shifting, which in 1982 was such new technology. And they were brave, you know, but it wasn't just the braveness in the production. Some of the songs to me, even when I listen to them now, they're so vulnerable. Like there's a song on that record called Screaming Blue. And for anyone that doesn't know that goes from, there's a bit where he's singing with just the piano, and it's about 10 decibels. And then it eventually erupts into this thing, which is like a jet airplane at the end, you know? And I just think that was back in the day where within one song, you could have that level of dynamics, like that Beatles kind of level of dynamics, you know? And no one was really doing that in the 80s. 80s was dominated by massive production and sort of almost one dynamic level, you know, for a 3.5-minute song. So look, if anyone doesn't know that record and they want to check it out without having to commit to the whole thing, just listen to the first two songs, which is Outside World and Only the Strong, which kind of like join together. Stick some headphones on, give that a crank, and you will know everything you need to know about the genius of that record. It has sounds on it that to this day I've not heard on classic rock bands records. It's, if I had to compare it to something better known, maybe Radiohead's OK Computer or something like that, where they really just went down the rabbit hole of how can we get the most interesting sounds. The performances are amazing. The songwriting is unusual and gorgeous. And every time I listen to it, I hear a new thing and I'm surprised, even now. So that's got to be up there for me.
I love that album, Hos. I really do.
It's classic.
How interesting. Great.
Yeah.
They were huge. They were huge here in New Zealand, guys. Yeah, they played at a couple of festivals. They dominated everything. I was starting to get a little bit political too in the mid-1980s, and there was a political element to them as well that that young people loved, especially, you know. So they took advantage of that movement, of that mood, and you know, spoke about a lot of social issues that probably a lot of bands didn't want to. So, you know, I give them credit for that. I give them credit, Hos, for that. And they looked cool. You know, you had this bald guy as this lead singer, and he was just all over he was just like this, he just dominate, but his backline, the band, they were cool. They were just on the beat all the time.
And speaking of the beat, Mark Tanner is there in the chat saying Rob Hurst, one of the greatest drummers. And I agree with that. He is undoubtedly one of the greatest drummers in the world, not just Australia. And actually on this record, I don't know if you know this, Mark, but they were recording in this particular studio in London where the sound was really echoey, and they were having real trouble with the drums and the cymbals. So Rob Hurst recorded that whole album with no cymbals. So what they had to do, so they overdubbed later all the cymbals. And so what they had to do, because he was a drummer and he was so used to hitting them, they used to have to put these blank rubber pads up where the cymbals were so he could still pretend he was hitting it and play the same part. And so even little things like that is just, to me, the genius of that record and why it sounds so unique, you know. But yeah, that's definitely, it's actually been voted in 5 separate polls over the last 20 years as one of the greatest Australian records ever made. So
absolutely, you know, US forces. You know, I remember. Yeah, you know, here in New Zealand, we were the first country to become. And we don't get into politics here, but it's important that we talk about this in relation to music. We're one of the first countries to become nuclear-free New Zealand. So US forces was an anthem. You know, because the Americans wanted to come here with their nuclear ships, you know, and the Labor government. But, you know, it was just, great album. Man, it's been years since I've listened to this album. I'm going to burn that baby after this show.
I was hanging out with a musician friend of mine late one night at my place, and it came up somehow, and they had never heard it, not one song off it. And so what I did was I got a Y splitter and
popped your cherry,
both of our headphones, and we sat on the lounge room floor. I turned out all the lights except for a few candles, and we listened to. I made them listen to the whole record, and they took their headphones out afterwards, and it was like it was the 1600s and they'd been to see Mozart or something, you know. It was, they were just like, so yeah, right up.
God bless you, Hos.
Thank you, Rock Professor.
Do you know? It's funny you should say that about speeding things up. I watched those Paul McCartney things with Rick Rubin. Who watched all those?
I haven't yet. I haven't, but I want to. Yeah.
What the one of the things did you, Andrew? You watched them. One of the picked up is that thing he said about slowing down the tape to half speed and recording a riff at half speed, an octave lower, and then when you speed it up, it's at the right speed and at the right octave. And he said they did that on some solos and stuff, didn't they? I can't remember which one it was, but he was talking about where they played it at half speed Yeah, and then they just sped it up. So it sounded really fast, but they hadn't been able to play it really fast. So they've done it slowly and then sped it up by making the tape half speed and then turning it back to full speed. Amazing. Little insight into how innovative the Beatles. Okay, my third choice. Sorry, Tom. Yeah.
No. Go on.
No, go on. No.
All I was going to quickly say is, I think there's something magical about how hard it was for people to make sound effects back in the day, but it was a labor of love. But it was done out of ingenuity and passion. Whereas now you just pull up a plugin in a computer, and I feel like in the end result suffers for that. Actually,
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, that your constraints are the things that make that unconstrained is not necessarily good for production of great art.
No, it isn't.
The Beatles had 4 tracks and 8 tracks. Look what they did with it. Because they just did it in spite of it. Just whatever we've got. Hitting anvils and putting Moog synthesizers on things, all sorts of stuff. But again, those constraints, I think were a good thing for the Beatles, not necessarily a bad thing.
I agree
for their stuff.
I agree.
Anyway, my third one, probably is this album. I don't expect many people to. I Want to Hear the Bright Side by Richard and Linda Thompson. Richard Thompson is, I would say, the great unsung British guitar player. He's also fantastic and songwriter, but guitar player. He's an extraordinary guitar player. I mean, he's one of those guys. He's got this thing where you play, and he plays 3 notes, and you go, "That's Richard Thompson." It just is. There's a way. He's got a whole kind of. He comes, if you're not familiar, he comes from a sort of English folk background. He was in a group called Fairport Convention when he joined them when he was 17, and he made 5 or 6 albums with them, including their classic, sort of riposte to the band, and music from the Big Pink. They took that idea, but they took in the English folk and made an album called Legion Leaf, which is a fantastic record. It's a British folk rock record, so again, that could have been nice. But he left them and he decided to. He made an album called Henry the Human Fly, which is the worst selling record in Ireland's history by a country mile.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's actually not that bad, but it's quirky. But he does all the. He's a bit like McCartney, did all the instruments pretty much. He had a small band, but this is his first album that he did with his wife, Linda Thompson.
Right.
It's a fantastic. It combines English folk with more of a rock thing. Yeah, so clearly it has a full band on it. It has the great Simon Nicol, and does it have Tim Donald on drums? But it's a kind of melancholic, bleak, desolate album in many ways. Getting the theme of what I've chosen. But yes, so I worry about myself. But it's a kind of Richard Thompson is like David Gilmour in that David Gilmour is very English, quite reserved, quite quiet, but when he plays guitar hack, look, yes, dudes, just for you.
Right.
Sorry.
Happy New Year, guitar hack.
Happy New Year. Hack, it's good to see you, man. So yes, Richard Thompson is like David Gilmour. It's that kind of English reserve, that kind of But David Gilmour, when he plays, that's where it all is, and Richard Thompson is the same. When he plays, that's where it all is. That English reserve, that kind of subtle, that kind of not making a big demonstrative sound. So this is not, but it has fantastic kind of subtle, quiet ways instrumentation. Like on the title track has a brass band on it that just comes in and plays a melody and stuff. A proper English colliery brass band that they used to have in each of the mining collieries in the north had their own bands, their own brass bands. That's what miners did. Yep. So one of the last ones, sadly, are pretty much all gone, but it has clearly the title track. It has a fantastic song called Withered and Died, which is just such a beautiful song, and Linda Thompson's great singer and stuff. So, for me, as I say, kind of has a subtle charm to it. Great songs, subtle guitar playing, but it's all in there. And Richard Thompson, I've seen him lots of times. I've seen him in a club with 100 people. He's mesmerizingly entertaining, but he has that kind of entertainer's face. But worth checking out. He did something called 1,000 Years of Music in one show, something all the way through, ending up with doing a "Oops, I Did It Again" by Britney Spears, which is great fun. But if you want to check out one of the great English guitar players,
all right,
there are other records of his where he stretches out more and has live stuff and things like that. Where you can get more idea of his guitar playing. But this, in terms of songs and stuff like that, is one of my favorite records of all time. And I've got to have a Richard Thompson record in it. But
I'm definitely going to have to check that out.
But I would say, Simon, if you want to check out one song, it's not on this record. It's called "Dimming of the Day."
Dimming of the Day. All right.
Dimming of the Day, and it has one of the great vocal lines in it. It just reduces me to a puddle every time I bloody hear it. Da, 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 da. Just in context, it's just so good. You think, who the hell did that? How did that go?
I'm gonna listen to that after this show. Thanks, Simon. Great.
But anyway, so that's my third choice.
Lovely. Bradley.
Oh, mine's pretty Physical Graffiti, Led Zeppelin, double album.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong. It's my Led Zeppelin albums, they change from lately, since we did the deep dive on Zeppelin 4, it's very much become one of my favorites as well. But I love all the Zeppelin albums for different reasons, but there's something about this album in particular that has like a bit of a journey on it. I know they recorded the songs at different times, and there was a bit of spill off from Zeppelin 4 and things like that. Like they weren't necessarily all fresh songs, but you've got to put side one, Custard Pie, The Rover, In My Time of Dying. It's just an epic album. There's the first side, second side, Houses of the Holy, Trampled Underfoot, Kashmir. Need I go on? In the Light, one of my favorite songs of Zeppelin. Bron You Were, Down by the Seaside, 10 Years Gone. Such a beautiful song, the music, and there's such depth to the album. Even down to the Wonton song and Boogie with Stew. There's just like one of those things about listening to an album when it actually you can listen to it from start to finish, and it's a long album. It's a double album, so it's worth every second of listening, in my opinion. And would it be something that I necessarily give to someone who's not a Zeppelin fan and never listened to Zeppelin as an album to listen to? I wouldn't say yes. I'd probably give them Zeppelin 4, or Zeppelin 2 maybe. But this album in particular just has a really beautiful flow, the way the tracks run into each other, and it evokes emotion. So it's definitely within my top 5, guys.
Well, that's cool. And I know what you mean about it's interesting, isn't it? Just because it's in your top 5 doesn't necessarily mean it would be the first album of Led Zeppelin you'd play to a non-Led Zeppelin person,
Yeah.
And I think that I can see a theme with all 4 of us, that some of these records aren't necessarily from the same artist. Like, Simon, you were saying just before, there's a song from Richard Thompson that's not on that album that you'd say, listen to that first. Yeah. Because these are obviously works that we're meant to be listening to holistically from the start to the finish, But, well, I believe that makes it time for ding, 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 ding.
Round 4.
Round 4, everybody. Andrew.
Okay, guys, I've picked Then Play On by Fleetwood Mac. It's the last album that Peter Green did with them. Again, I've been telling you guys that these stories behind these albums that I've picked, and this is certainly another story. It's a what-if story, It was the album that was going to set them onto actual superstardom, but Peter Green went on to have issues. It's an album that just has this tonal majesty for me, fighting for Madge, the twin guitars, lead guitars, that went on and set the benchmark for the Allman Brothers and these other bands to follow. It's a benchmark album that deserves its place because of that. But Simon mentioned a word before when he was talking about one of his albums, Melancholy. It's an album that gives me great melancholy when I sit there and listen to it, because there are some sad songs on there, and it's again fed by what happened with Peter Green, with his LSD, and then what that caused with him as far as mental issues. Just kind of breaks my heart. Broke my heart when I was a young guy getting into music, and I thank my uncles for exposing me to this stuff, and it breaks my heart now because it could have been a what if, but definitely no skips on that record. It's a double album. Check it out. Danny Kerwin shines on it too.
Well, all right, awesome,
wonderful album, Andrew.
Yeah. Can I just say something too with Andrew, you're just talking about melancholy, and Simon was talking about before about how a lot of his records seem to have that thing. I think it's just because that the records that we're choosing as our favorites are the ones that move us emotionally. Like, don't get me wrong, I love a good rock or hard rock or even heavy metal album that I want to dance around the lounge room to, or pump my fist in the air. But when it comes to when I really get to what's real and an album that I'd take with me on a long trip or something, I want something that moves me in my heart. And obviously, Andrew, that's what you're talking about. And Simon, that's what you're talking about. And Brad too, any of the albums too that I've picked, and some of them, like the Midnight Oil one we were just talking about, has some full on rock songs. I don't know if they say they move me in my heart, but they move me in some way, and definitely there are tracks on the album that do move me in my heart, So my next album is from 1992 also. And I've noticed that a lot of mine tend to be around early, mid-90s. So I think it was because probably that at that point as a musician.
How old were you, Simon? How old were you in 92?
92, I was 18. No, I was 18. And I do think that's an age where you've learned the fundamentals of music, and now you can appreciate what a great album really is, as opposed to when you're younger, it's really more superficial probably, and when you're older, conversely, you can overthink it a little bit. But so my next one is from 92, and it was, I got my first car, and I made sure I put a really great cassette player in the car for the car stereo. And this cassette that I had dubbed ended up staying in the car for 2 whole years. I never took it out. So every time I turned the car on, this album was playing for 2 years. And it's Prince's Love Symbol record. And it's got 16 tracks on it, so it's a huge album. And what I didn't know at the time, which blew my mind when I found it out, is because all the songs are so different. There's these slow, kind of cool, breezy reggaes, and then there's some that are just hardcore nightclub funk, like My Name is Prince, Sexy MF, all that stuff that we know. But then there's one of the most beautiful ballads ever called Damn You, which is a play on, he's basically saying, damn you because you're so fine. So when you read the lyrics, it looks like he's angry, but actually when you look deeper, it's because it's a play on words, but the music in that is gorgeous. There's another great track on that album called Love to the Nines, which is a cool kind of R&B funky thing, but with these, 10 stacked Queen style Prince harmonies that he's known for. And he's done a clever thing where when he sings to the nines on the word nines, all his 10 vocal harmonies are singing 9 chords. So he's done a kind of a image painting thing with it. And it was just, it was a time of my life where, obviously I'm free. I'm out of high school. I'm driving around in a car. I'm getting myself to gigs. And even though I was playing mostly rock and hard rock gigs, that Prince album just stayed in my car. So I got to know it so intimately. I know every little tiny sound on that record. And so when I found out later that it was a concept album and it's about an Egyptian princess who falls in love with a rock star and she's being chased by 7 assassins, so she gives him this kind of ancient artifact as for safekeeping, I was like, what? And then I went through in my mind all the songs in order, and of course, it's basically his version of a rock opera, like a musical, you know. And so anyway, that would I just know that album so well that it's part of my DNA, and I think the reason that I love even rock guitarists that play in a more funky way, like Nuno Bettencourt, and I love Nile Rodgers' funk playing, is because I listen to so much funk accidentally through Prince that it just got under my skin, you know. So that's one of mine.
Cool. I'm just going to jump in here and say I know that album pretty good, pretty well. I worked with a couple of guys that loved Prince, and these were guys that were Hendrix nuts. And I knew the pop songs, Hos, on Prince, and you know, Purple Rain, the movie, going to, you know, but these guys were instrumental. And it's interesting, you sit and hang out with guys and they tell you, man, you got to check this stuff out. This guy is playing all the instruments, bro. This guy isn't just standing there looking cool. This guy is doing it all. And it kind of caught my imagination. Loved it, you know. He had it all. The guy had it all. He had hotness around him. He was just playing hot stuff. Little Red Corvette was the song that got me in 1999, that album. I remember getting that album thinking, holy cow. So, go and check Prince out. Just a marvelous musician. Haven't heard this album for a long time, Hos. Certainly another album I'm going to burn tomorrow. Love everything that Prince did. Even his early stuff. Go and check some of that early stuff out. His first album.
The early stuff, amazing.
It's gonna it'll freak you out.
Yep. Yeah. The one thing that you always knew you were not one thing. The three things you always knew you were going to get with a Prince album before it came out is the songs were going to be interesting. Even if you didn't love them, you knew they would be interesting at least. The production and the sound, the mix was going to be like gold coming out of the speakers because they were so well recorded and mixed. And his band were of levels of musicianship that are frightening. Like, you know, every member of the band, including the horn sections and the backing singers. So even sometimes I'd buy a Prince record that just came out and it wouldn't really become one of my favorites, but it was never a disappointing listen. It was always fascinating and always sounded like the best that your speakers were going to sound in that year, you know?
And go and check out, we've mentioned this before, there's a guitar solo, it's all over YouTube, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and he's playing his Telecaster, which is just a cheap Telecaster, guys. It's not a Fender Telecaster. It's a Telecaster he's had with him since he was a young boy, and he just about falls off the stage. I can't swear we're a family show.
Is that the one where at the end he throws the guitar up in the air and it never comes down or something? Is it that one?
No, I don't know if it's that one.
Two different things together.
But yeah. Check Prince out.
Check that out. Yeah.
Just, and apparently, before we get on, I was watching this documentary about 6 months ago, but apparently his vault is just full of music because the guy was just recording stuff all the time. He was just, Wow.
Oh yeah.
I love Prince too, Hos. I mean, I've always loved Prince. I've loved that record. I love Purple Rain. You know, I played in a tribute to Prince for a few shows, just as at Cherry Bar in Melbourne and things like that, just as a celebration of his life when he passed away.
Yeah.
And the guitar playing just alone, I mean, you listen to it at first and you're like, that's no problem. But then you get into the intricacies and you're like, wow, man, there's a lot of stuff going on here. It's just
very intricate.
Wow. Yeah. Very classy, very, very good, like arrangement wise on the guitar, just to fit in with what was going on in his head. Just amazing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally
Sign
agree.
of the Times for me. Sign of the Times is the great Prince record.
Yep.
In some ways, you could, there's so many great Prince records. You've got to argue that Purple Rain is maybe more everlasting than something like his Love Symbol record. It's just that I happen to know that one better because I listened to it for 2 years, you know. So, and amazing guitarist too. Simon.
Okay, my second last choice is, of course, I've talked about
Oh, yeah.
Dark Side of the Moon. Dark Side of the Moon.
What an album.
I've talked about this record a lot. About my parents lived in a 5-story house, and I had the room at the top, little room at the top of the house, and it had a parapet outside, so quite a long way up. And I used to put this on my little stereo, and I used to lie out on the parapet and look at the stars, you know, whilst Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon was playing. I can't.
Right.
No
That's where your bong
substances were
was.
taken. This is yes, complete. Nice. I'm 14. It's pre any of that. It's just the thing about light.
Brilliant.
Just lying out on the parapet and the stars, you know, just looking at the stars, you know, the night sky, and having Dark Side of the Moon play. It's just, you know, it's a thing
that
I
would be
cannot
amazing.
describe. You know,
Yeah, that would be amazing.
And I, you know, but again, it, you know, this is an album that has a kind of English melancholy about it. You know, it has a thing about the passing of time and death and dying. And yes, I'm a cheerful 14-year-old. I am. It's that I really you know, to the 14-year-old, you probably are going to tap into those things as a teenager. But you know, I felt it had depth, it had thing, and you know, and David Gilmour, you know, who I said earlier, it's like Richard Thompson. That thing about, you know, he's very quiet, very reserved, and when he plays, it's all there, all the emotion, all the, you know, what he does when he comes in. It's all about, you know, the melody. It's, you know, you know, and the service of the songs. And I loved all the joining up, all the, you know, all the weird noisy bits, you know, the joining up stuff that they did on the VCS3 that my dad had. My dad had one of those VCS3s, so I kind of knew how to do those things a bit. You know, again, part of my growing up DNA, an album that I loved then and I love now. We did a fantastic couple of shows on it with Michael, you know, and you know, I look back on those with great fondness. And again, for me, as I say, part of my DNA. And you know, and I saw Pink Floyd, you know, play in that around that time. They were, you know, brilliant, and I've loved them ever since. And I love quite a lot. I don't love everything they've done. I think The Wall is a bit patchy, but you know, those albums that he made in the early 70s, you know, that Wish You Were Here,
so good,
and some of the early ones, you know, I mean, I like the first one. I like the one with Syd Barrett on it. You know, Pink Floyd, you know, the sort of the wild and crazy weird one. But this is my album of choice. I've had it for, you know, 50 years.
That's awesome.
It's a fantastic. Well, you know, clearly it's a fantastic record. You know, because it stayed in the charts for 100 years, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Hey, Simon, can I quickly ask you? You were saying that you first heard that when you were 14. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
when it came
would
out.
it be fair? So did you hear that one before the other 3 albums you've just mentioned?
Well, before Bright Lights, and definitely before Blood on the Tracks, and certainly, yeah. So this is the earliest one so far.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because it's almost because that Pink Floyd record is so deep, and you're right, it has a melancholy but serious, but not in a way that's depressing, in a way that's sort of beautiful, you know. But maybe because you loved that so much at 14, that almost set a blueprint for you of the kinds of things you would love, you know.
For sure. Yeah. It's you know, yeah. So that's my Pink Floyd record. And I had to have Dark Side of the Moon.
You have to, yeah.
That thing about lying out on the parapet and, you know, and watching stuff when you're 14 is a thing you can't do when you're as old as I am. Well, you can, but it kind of doesn't quite have the same thing as when you're 14 and doing it, which is, you know, it's a fantastic memory. That.
Right.
Anyway.
Brad.
Oh, well, look, that's a great one, Simon. I have to agree. That's right up there for me as well, Dark Side of the Moon. But unfortunately for Pink Floyd, this one edges it out a little bit. The Doors' self-titled album.
Of course. Yeah.
Absolutely adore this album. There's just something about it. It's their debut album. There's a real psychedelia feel. The Ray Manzarek was like probably one of the most freakiest musicians that I've ever listened to. You know, there was something hypnotic about the way he played. He would get you into a trance, almost like just listening to songs like The End. when they used to play Break On Through and the intro when they were vamping and all that sort of stuff. But listening to this record from start to finish is like a journey within itself. There's just so much depth to the album. One of my favorite Doors songs is The Crystal Ship. I love that song. But obviously it's got, Break On Through, Soul Kitchen, Light My Fires on it. Andrew will be happy about this one. It's got Backdoor Man on it. The end. Like, they're just such epic songs, and they just did music their own way. Obviously they created a particular sound to me, and I remember listening to this record like, I was a young kid. I just got my license, driving, along pitch black dark, listening to this record, and the end had come on, and you just crank it to the point where your speakers in your car are almost like blowing out, just listening to that with the open tuning on the low D on the guitar, and something hypnotic about that, and the feel on the drums. It's just not. They weren't straight. There was a Latin feel. There was a jazz feel. There was there was blues in there. And Morrison, as much as people love or hate him, I still think he had one of the most interesting voices in rock music. To me, he's had a lot of depth and timbre in his voice, but there was something the way he would phrase words, the way he would sing. He would catch you and pull you into the music. So, I wish that I would have been able to see the Doors live. That would have been something that probably would have blown my mind. And that was what they set out to do back then, was to blow people's minds. So, that's my thought.
Wow. Yeah. Awesome. Well, you know what that means, gents. It's our final round 5.
I've saved my best for last, gentlemen. I've picked Revolver by the Beatles. Every song on the album's a masterpiece. It's the album that I think Sgt. Pepper has a lot to thank. The innovation that went behind this album with the auto tracking machine, and we've ranked this album on the channel, so guys, go and check that show out. To the singles that were released around this album, Paperback Writer and Rain, masterpiece songs in themselves. I love it. You've got the Eastern philosophy coming through, which was really, really important to the Beatles. You've got the idea of producing an album now as opposed to songs. And the Rock Professor likes to talk about that. There's a difference between an album and an album full of songs, if you understand that. And hopefully we've managed to elaborate and articulate that on some of the shows that we've done in the past. But this album is everything for me. The songwriting, a true collaborative effort by the principal songwriters on this album too. So there was that camaraderie there. But again, Hos, I have to put it down. I love the backstory. The backstory behind this album. I'm not an advocate of drug use at all, and nor are the Beatles anymore. Well, the ones that are alive. But this album was part of that whole scene. Brad mentioned it earlier. Psychedelia movement. This album was part of that burgeoning movement. Look at the stark, cool cover, black and white. Love it. Everything about it's fantastic. It's a masterpiece. If you guys haven't checked this album out for a long time, the last song especially, and the Rock Professor, I know, absolute Tomorrow Never Knows, is just mind-blowing, just perfect. Hos.
Look what you can do with 4 tracks.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's true. Like you said earlier, Simon, your constraint, it becomes your genius, Well, my album has nothing to do with constraint my next one, because actually it's only about 5 years old. It's an odd one for me because it's from 2016. Nice. And so it was made, written, and produced in an era where you could have as many tracks as you wanted. And believe me, they used most of them. I don't know how many tracks some of these songs would have had, but I would be in the hundreds for sure. I've been lucky enough to actually have come across the individual tracks of one of the singles, and I can tell you it is a masterclass in how to produce a modern pop song. It has got stuff in there that you cannot hear in the final mix, but when you take it out, the song doesn't sound as good. It's just so clever. I'll save what it is for a little bit of a surprise. How I came across this was I was just in my car one day, and the second single came onto the radio, and I was like, woo, what is this? This is a cool song from some pop girl, you know? And I was bashing the steering wheel to the beat, you know, while I was driving down the road. And there was something about it to me that felt very rock and roll. Like it's definitely squarely in the pop, you know, female pop world. But there was something about it that had this sort of a darkness or this deep groove that was really getting me going. So, of course, I pulled out my phone and used, one of the sound apps to figure out what it was. And I was like, oh, really? Oh, I can't believe I like it this much. But anyway, I kept listening to this single for a long time and absorbing it and listening to the production and listening to the mix. And then I ended up just buying the album on my phone on iTunes. And so subsequently, I just started listening to the whole album like we've been talking about, from the first track to the last track. And I never a skip for any of the songs. There's everything on there from reggae to 50s doo-wop to deep house to disco. It's every song is different from the last, and it's a really great mishmash of modern female pop kind of stuff. There's some soul in there. When I wanted to know, okay, I need to know the people behind this record. This record is so damn good and sounds so good on any stereo I play it on. Who worked on this? Well, let me tell you that I felt a bit better about loving a female pop princess's record when I learned that the person who produced it and co-wrote it has produced so many number one songs around the world that he's only second to George Martin. And he has written so many number one songs that the only two people in history that have written more number ones than this guy is John Lennon and Paul McCartney.
Wow.
And the guy that mixed it has 20 Grammys and has mixed 188 number one singles, which is just mind-boggling to me. So, of course, it makes complete sense that when you have a team like that, if this record was anything other than probably at least in my top 20, then they've done something wrong. So the album is Dangerous Woman by Ariana Grande.
Yeah.
Wow.
And for anyone that isn't familiar with it, I mean, any of the songs are good, but the second single, which was the one that hooked me in my car that day, is a song called Into You. And I can actually let you in on some songwriting secrets, because even though there's no, this isn't written anywhere that I could find online, because I've heard the isolated tracks, I've been able to discover how they wrote the song. And creeping underneath all the modern production is essentially the drum beat to Billie Jean and the middle eight and the middle eight from Michael Jackson's Thriller, but played backwards. And so what they've done is they've said, what are drum beats and grooves and dances that everyone knows in their bones, and let's start from that and build a brand new song on that. And what sounds like synthesizers building and building and building is actually a choir of synthesized male voices just breathing, and then they've made notes out of the breathing, which is why if you're thinking, wow, this sounds sort of strange, that's why. And so it became one of my favorite records, and I probably just in 5 years, I have estimated I would have listened to that 300 or 400 times, probably the whole record.
Wow. Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, yes, Keith, I did just say Ariana Grande.
You did just say that, Ariana Grande.
I should also say I don't just blanketly love any album she's put out. It is particularly the Dangerous Woman record that Max Martin co-produced and co-wrote, and that Serban Gania mixed. That one for me, there was a magic to all those songs to me that is hard to put a finger on, like all these records, you know. So I think I'd have to, for a modern record, that's got to be in there for me.
Wow. I'm definitely going to check that out, Hos.
Cool.
I know a couple of the songs off it, what you're talking about. But
well, Brad, I'm going to have to get you around to my studio to actually play you the isolated tracks of this song so that you see what I'm talking about. But because it's quite astounding, actually.
100%. Love to.
Yeah.
Simon.
So
the rock professor's final one.
Predictably, my last one. Well, we've already talked about it, which is why I made it my last one, which is of course Physical Graffiti by Led Zeppelin. This is where I came in with Led Zeppelin. I think probably their first album that I bought. Maybe not quite, but I think their masterpiece in so many ways. I think it's it's got everything you'd ever want in a rock album. You know, I mean, it covers a lot of ground musically. It's got rocks, funk, soul, folk, loads of different styles. I think their abilities as individual musicians, unsurpassed. I mean, if you want anything played that's out of the ordinary, John Paul Jones can play it. I think Jimmy Page is, as Brad said, is such a brilliant producer. He knows what's needed, and he can play just the bits that are needed for that song. It's not, I never feel like it's overplayed, any of the tracks. I never feel like, there's too much going on. I always think there's enough going on to keep them interesting, but all the parts fit together. They all do really well. He understands space as much as he understands filling it up. And clearly, for me, John Bonham is the greatest rock drummer ever. I think in that sort of genre, he is the greatest. The swing, the things that he does are just not like anyone else, really.
Yeah.
They're not, other drummers just as great, in different fields, I think. But for me, he, whenever you hear him, you go, he's got the swing and he somehow can do stuff. And again, I went to see them, Led Zeppelin in 1975. This had come out, so it's just, they are a masterpiece, Johnny. You're right.
I'm going to pinch that one, Johnny.
Yeah. So I saw them in 1975 at Earls Court. Clearly, the tracks of this album, were the centerpiece to that concert. I mean, I think that it's, Kashmir is just a track beyond tracks. You can listen to it now. It's as fresh as the day it was recorded 50 years ago, nearly. And, it's an extraordinary kind of, that rising thing. And, they've done, there's a version of them on with Robert Plant with an Egyptian orchestra that is equally amazing. But that song, but other ones on it too. And I love the eclectic stuff towards the end, Boogie with Stew and stuff like that is great. Sort of I'm a sucker for a boogie woogie piano. As we'll get to in the green room. I'll tell you that story later. But so for me, again, at the heart of everything that I am, as a person, really, that record is, right up there. I can remember we used to go, when I was about 16, we used to go to a Wednesday nights. There was a club called Tiffany's. That, for the most part, was a standard disco. But on Wednesday nights, it was rock night. They had a rock disco. A guy called Andy Fox did a rock disco. And, I can remember I've boogied around to Trampled Underfoot and, rock and roll and things. And those are, I was 16 then. That's like my halcyon days of wine and roses. And I look back on it with such fondness.
Simon, I got to agree with you. If you guys haven't checked it out, it might get loud in here. And Jimmy Page stands up and it's his turn to play. And Jack White and the Edge are there and he starts playing the intro to Kashmir and he freaks them out, doesn't he? They just sit there and go,
Yeah. Look, there's a reason why John Bonham was the most sampled drummer of all time, because he was quite unique. He had something that was so catchy and he's playing out a swing, had a feel. And there's a lot of amazing drummers out there, but I have to agree with you. So I think he was probably the greatest drummer of all time in the sense where for rock music, he captured a feel that so many people after him have inherited themselves. But obviously there was drummers before him. Buddy Rich was a massive inspiration to Bonham. And when you listen to Bonham solo, man, you can hear Buddy Rich all around. But he had his own style too, which is something that was quite unique. But it was a different era back then. I think drummers back then used to be more about playing as part of the song. And I still, to this day, think the drummers do play as part of a song. But when you watch Get Back, for example, with the Beatles, you see how integral Ringo is in the songwriting. And you see how integral, and I firmly believe Bonzo was the same. And without Bonzo without Bonzo in Led Zeppelin, there's no way they could have continued. That was was never going to happen.
I agree with that.
I just see Keith Campbell's put a message. When you listen to Bonham's isolated tracks, they sound like a band playing already, and you can hear him like on his and he's screaming and yelling while he's doing his fills and stuff, and it's great, But I think it's
that's one of the things, isn't it? So one of the things about Zeppelin, that thing about playing together, all the basic tracks are done in a room playing together. Before click tracks and stuff like that. And I have a thing about, people who were born pre-click tracks kind of feel music in a different way than people who were born post-click tracks. I think we feel the movement of it in a way, and the click track doesn't have that movement, and therefore I feel less engaged with that music when it's done to click track, because I feel like it doesn't speed up in the chorus where it should, because that's what I was brought up on. I don't know if that's true, but that's kind of my feeling about it, is that, for me, modern music, most of it is a bit too straight, if you like. It doesn't move things. I'm sure I'm wrong about that, but that's what I kind of feel about it. But that's what I love most about them, is that when you see them on stage, when you see them, they might be on a really big stage, but they're all in the middle. They're here. Page, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham are within inches of each other, feet. But when you watch them at the O2 with that bloody great stage, a lot of it's just over here, and they're all in the middle, because. That's how they work. They work as a band, as a three-piece. That kind of, that sort of, way of understanding. That way of understanding and playing together, that they kind of built into their, where they were and how they played. That is to me still astonishing. You
mentioned this the other day, Simon, and I watched it again today. So I've been going through a bit of a Led Zeppelin buzz too. But I got to agree with you.
Yeah,
Well,
so apologies for doubling up, but
no, it's not. Well, on this show that we do have similar taste and we do have variances as well, but. I knew there'd be at least one crossover somewhere along the way between the four of us. There had to be. It was almost going to happen. So,
well, that's the number one album, because that's the crossover. So that's the number one album out of the top 20 we've done.
That's right. In fact, guys, I'm surprised that there hasn't been more doubling up, actually, but it's good. So that's number one.
Yeah. Well, I think it's my last one, and this was a really difficult one for me because I had to try and pinpoint one more album out of 5. So I really sat down with a list of 10 albums, and I just really focused on the first 3 that I went through tonight were already just mandatories. And then the other ones, obviously the last 2 were more, I have to add this one, I have to add this one. And this one in particular, as well as being a rock fan, I love metal music, I love all styles of music, but blues music is very near and dear to my heart. And there's so many amazing blues albums out there and artists. And, I love Gary Moore, Still Got the Blues. I love Buddy Guy. Anything Buddy Guy's done, I love. B.B. King, Albert King. But to me, the ultimate blues musician and guitarist and purist, Stevie Ray Vaughan. And this in particular, couldn't stand the weather. I had to add this as my top 5. Every single song on it, there's something quite unique. And I know we've done one or two shows, Andrew, on Stevie Ray Vaughan with Matt from Dropkick Blues and stuff like that. But for me, from the very opening track of this album, Scuttle Button, into Couldn't Stand the Weather, Things I Used to Do, into Voodoo Child, then Cold Shot, Tempin Alley, Honeybee, and then Stang Swing. So it's one of those albums that it's just like, and what's remarkable about it is how little overdubbing and stuff Stevie Ray Vaughan would do. And I love that, because he would just play from the heart and soul, and you can hear that in his playing. And I've heard outtakes for particular albums, and a lot of them have come out. There's other ones that haven't come out. But if you listen to the outtakes, they're not much different to what you're hearing. And what I love about that is it was the band just performing. Stevie Ray had an amazing rhythm section. Double Trouble were just outstanding. They knew exactly where he was going to go. But to me, Stevie, you know, like Eddie Van Halen, Stevie was brought to us to show us what could be done on guitar and as a blues musician. But he channeled something quite different to other musicians, in my opinion. He wasn't necessarily with us when he was playing. You can see him channeling something. So when I listened to this album, it's quite special. I remember hearing it in a car once, and I was just blown away. And I still remember the first two tracks just absolutely knocked my socks off. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I just literally was just floored. And ultimate guitar player for like blues guitarist, in my opinion. Ultimate blues guitarist. And this album in particular is just non-stop perfection to me as a blues artist. So that's why it's in my 5.
How old were you, Brad, when you first heard SRV?
Look, Hos, I started playing guitar a bit later than you did. I was like 17, you know, when I started taking it seriously. And I started strumming things like, you know, It Smells Like Teen Spirit and everything like that. And I was starting to get into Guns N' Roses, and I was starting to get into, you know, Led Zeppelin and this and that. And then I got into the blues like Clapton, Stevie Ray, Gary Moore. But this particular album, I would have been no more than 17, 18 when I heard it, maybe even younger. But listening to it again for the first time as a guitar player, I was just floored.
Yes.
So,
gotcha. Yeah. Great. Yep.
Yeah. So that's my top 5, guys, and I'm sticking with it.
Excellent.
There's a lot of support for Stevie Ray Vaughan.
A lot of support
from a lot of the guys in the chat, digging that pick there, bro. So well done.
I think we need to deep dive a little bit more SRV moving forward.
Mate, as you know, you'll get no argument from me. I think we've done a couple of bro downs, midweek specials when you were in lockdown on Stevie Ray Vaughan, and I think we did a Alma combo with Matt. So look, I'll deep dive Stevie Ray Vaughan with you any day, anywhere, brother.
It's such an amazing thing watching Stevie Ray, and I'll just say this really quickly. It's what is it? The Austin City Limits gigs that were released on DVD and videotape. There's the second performance where he's wearing a black shirt and he's cleaner. He's been through rehab. He's come through the other side of addictions, and he looks a bit chubbier in the face. He's got a bit of color, and he's playing, he's singing, and amazing. If you watch, there's one particular song, Leave My Little Girl Alone. And if you go and watch that, I want everyone in the chat or watching this later to concentrate on watching his face while he's playing, because you never really watch his face. You're watching, I mean, he pulls amazing, like, you know, face melting faces, but there's one point where he comes back to sing and he opens his eyes, and they're not, his pupils are in the back of his head. It's just white. That's true. I've noticed that too. Yeah. He does that a lot. So that, to me, he's channeling something different there. He wasn't really on the same plane as most guitar players. It was something was channeling through him, and that was something that just, I've seen him do it a lot when I've watched it. And the wonderful thing about YouTube is there's a lot of bootlegs now on Stevie Ray out there, and encourage everyone to get any young blues guitarist or any guitarist that loves like blues music, you have to deep dive Stevie Ray Vaughan. Full stop.
Yeah, agreed.
That's it for me, guys.
Well, gentlemen, there we got through it. Our 20 of our most favorite records.
Mm.
Yeah.
What
fantastic.
a blast! What a yeah. It's been a blast, and I have to tell you because I've just unscripted a lot of my presentations. Normally, in some of the shows we do, Hos, we as you know, we write a lot of stuff down, and if we don't show them on the screen and share shots to the Rock Professor, we get into trouble for that. So, but you allowing us to do this unscripted has been fantastic, brother. Thank you.
Oh, you don't have to thank me. It's been really interesting too, of course, to see everybody else's choices in the chat. You know, and obviously anyone that wants to watch this on the replay, put your choices in the comments too, you know, because we're really interested.
Well, I'm just going to jump in before my other co-hosts. So I had one surprise, and that's Ariana Grande. I've got to tell you. So when Hos flicked that to me, I was really tempted, and he sent a couple of messages saying, I've got some information that's going to make it a little bit more fuller for you to understand and appreciate, Andrew. And I was thinking, oh shit, do I just go and get my earpods and check this album out, you know?
Well, the thing that not a lot of people know is that Max Martin, who's produced all these number one hits, and obviously they have been primarily in a style of pop, you know, and quite structured, and he would be the first one to admit it. But Max Martin himself grew up through the 80s as a blues and rock guitarist and vocalist. So it just so happens that his real forte ended up being writing and producing in Sweden, you know. So he gets to basically live at home with his family and you know, take the loot from all these number ones. So good on him. But he was primarily a rock guitarist.
Well, I'm going to check it out, brother. Like I said, and I'll get back to you. I'll get back to the Hos with the scorecard. But yeah, I certainly have every intention of checking that out.
And I've got some great listening to do of the albums that you guys have talked about too, which is, as you already know, one of my favorite things coming into this is that I knew that I would now listen to some of these records with brand new, fresh ears. After hearing the passion with which you've spoken about it and how it's influenced you either when you were young or as an adult, I just think it's wonderful. It's so interesting to hear about what moves people.
Yeah. No, that's I'm the same, Hos. I'm going to be looking at a lot of these different now, and I'm going to go and listen with fresh ears. And you've actually alluded us to hopefully some things that are going to resonate really strong with us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously it's the British Electric Blues Show, and so some of my choices might be a bit left of that, except for that, you know, Prince is essentially a blues guitarist, and even the Meshell Ndegeocello stuff I was talking about. I mean, R&B and soul is basically pretty closely related to the blues when you take it back a few decades. So I think in some ways everything really is coming from the same genesis, you know. So
Oh, nothing wrong with that. There's no.
And actually, John said
no boundaries in this at all.
Yeah, and John says in the chat, to hell with justifying why any album is your fave. Even the worst music ever is somebody else's fave, and that's exactly right too. You know,
100%. Well, today's been really fun, guys. But before I forget, I want to say one thing to everyone in the chat and everyone that supports the channel. Thanks for helping us get to 800 subscribers last year. We're into 2022 with over 800 subscribers. So massive thank you for that, and all the support and everything that you guys show us. We're forever grateful. Thank you.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
Yeah, fantastic.
It's an achievement. We're just a small, humble channel, and it's a massive achievement for us. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So that was really good, and I'm really looking forward. Like you, Brad, I'm looking forward to going out and checking things that I don't know anything about. Well, I've never listened to Ariana Grande, so that'll be good. And I've never listened to the Midnight Oil one. I don't know that at all, really. I'm really in those Beds of Burning from them, so that's fantastic.
So what I need you guys to do for me, please, if you can text me through so that I don't have to do all the hard work. I can just cut and paste it. If you guys can text me through your albums, and I'll attach them on the comments, on the on the description for people as well too. If you guys can do that for me, Simon, I will definitely be checking out the Fairport. Who was the English?
Richard
Thompson.
Yes, I'll be definitely checking him out too, and I'll be giving you a report card on that too. Thank you, brother.
And what was the song name? Was it Diary of the Day?
No, Dimming of the Day.
Dimming of the Day.
Dimming of the Day. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to listen to that. In fact, I don't know if we're allowed can do this, Andrew, but if we're going to put our final 20 list in the description, maybe it would be interesting also to have, because most of this stuff will exist on YouTube somewhere. If we had to pick one song off the record that for someone that's never heard that record or that artist, to have a YouTube link under each one as well, maybe.
Oh yeah. Well, you guys, you fire them through to me, and I'll attach them.
We'll fire them through.
Yeah.
There's some chin stroking time, isn't it? No, which one's
exactly. Yeah. One song off each album. There you go.
Awesome. Guys, thank you very much for hanging out with us. It's been fantastic. We've had some great comments from everybody in the chat. Jason, we had a young guy, Hayden, here hanging out with us. We got, guys, if Hayden's still here, we're going to get Hayden on one of the 5150 shows, He's an Australian, he's an Aussie. He's a 14-year-old Van Halen nut. He's going to come on. He's going to spend an hour hanging out with us talking about Van Halen. This guy is amazing. So he just wants to hang out with Hos and Brad on a 5150 show. So I said, yep.
Oh, fantastic.
Awesome. Well done.
That's
awesome.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Awesome. Can't wait.
Hos, it's your show. You're going to have the final word, and then I'm going to play the trailer.
Okay.
Trailer.
Final word. Look, I guess we've obviously had a lot more people since we began the show join us in the chat. So thank you to everyone. Happy New Year, of course, to everybody. I hope it's safe. I hope you all have a few days off, and don't exert yourselves too hard, at least for the first week, But thanks for joining us. It's been so much fun. Thanks for all your suggestions of other great albums as well. We can read back through the chat of those. And Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, guys.
Yeah.
Indeed, yeah. I'm just having. See you.